Hello, everyone. We are live. Things look to be going good on my end. Let me know if you're able to see me, if you're able to hear me, and if everything is sorting itself out well on the technical side. I do have a brand new microphone, and I'm still figuring out how to best work with it. So let me know. But let's get on to the topic at hand, which is episode 3 of American Paganism and Witchcraft, even though I mislabeled it as episode 4. I'll fix that later. But today we are talking about sacred animals. We're going to be focusing on the native fauna of America, some mythical creatures, one of European origin, one of native origin, and how these are just emblematic of the American spirit and how this might really relate to our own developing spirituality on this particular continent. So, as you have thoughts and ideas and reactions as we go along with the stream, I hope you won't be bashful and just let me know. I do so enjoy it when the audience is able to be a little bit more participatory in these things. So let's just dive in and get started. So, I thought I would lay out the framework by which I'm going to be doing this discussion because, of course, we cannot cover every single native species of America. It's a big continent, and our nation takes up quite a chunk of it. And then, of course, the native fauna in Alaska and versus Hawaii, that's going to be a little bit different. So you're just going to have to extrapolate a little bit and think about the principles involved if you happen to be in a different area. And of course, not every species I've chosen is over the entirety of the continental United States, but a lot of them are fairly common, and most of us are at least familiar with these species and have a reaction to them when we hear about them. So I chose, a bird, reptile, a mammal, an amphibian, an insect, an arachnid, a fish, and of course the mythical beings. And I thought that would be enough for us to kind of get started with. And then, if you take away anything from today's talk, maybe think about your own home state, where you live. What is, perhaps the most common bird that you have this more of a visceral reaction to that just seems important? What are the common reptiles and mammals, etc., and so on? What has actually surrounded you? Because, of course, paganism has always been a rather localized affair. And it's difficult to have a localized American paganism when we're trying to have a conversation that has relevance to all of us across the nation. But, we're going to take a stab at it. And of course, just think about honing in on your local surroundings and thinking about what species are really speaking to you on the spiritual level. So, of course, for the bird, it has to be the bald eagle. What else? It's been the emblem for America since 1782, rather. Then for the reptile, the rattlesnake, another obvious choice. It was an icon of the revolution and the Don't Tread on Me flag, which is still quite popular today. For the mammal, I chose the buffalo because it was this majestic, huge animal on the plains, and it played a rather significant role in that chapter of our history. Then for the amphibian, I chose the bullfrog because I'm very familiar with those. They serenade us all summer, and they do have a pretty wide range of the United States. For the insect, I picked the monarch butterfly, and not only because of its transformative potential, but just because it is a common form of butterfly that we know of. And unlike some other insects that we have kind of I don't, not even a love hate relationship with, but just an outright hate, mosquitoes come to mind. I wanted something that was a bit more uplifting. So that's the monarch butterfly. Then for the arachnid, I picked the American house spider as the weaver of people and of fate. We'll get into the symbolism of that a lot more later on. Then for the fish, the salmon, and I picked the salmon as opposed to other fish species, specifically because of its tendency to swim against the current. And it always does that in an effort to perpetuate its own species. So always it's about making sure that the future comes into being. And I feel like that's very important. And then for our mythical, for the European mythical being, I chose the phoenix to really focus on because of its tendency to rise from the ashes. And then the a mythical being that's native of this land is the thunderbird, representing really raw elemental power. And so let's just see how all of this weaves together and how all of it really relates to the American spirit in general. A lot of these will feel pretty obvious, but I think it's important for us to acknowledge these things for what they are. It's part of claiming in American pagan culture. So let's get going with the bald eagle. It first appeared on the national seal in 1782. and the status of it being, our bird, that was formally recognized in 1787. So it has a long history with us. And the motivation for choosing the bald eagle specifically, as opposed to any other bird or any other kind of eagle, is because for one, it is native to this particular continent, and historically, eagles in general, they've been associated with authority and the existence of the state. So, if you're going to represent the American state, you probably could not choose any better bird than the eagle. And this symbolism really goes back to at least the time of ancient Rome. Then they also used the eagle to represent governmental power, or at least military power, which they had in abundance in those days. So again, the reason why the bald eagle was specifically selected is because its species, it's native to the American continent, because it's very long lived. It has tremendous strength for a bird. And I mean, let's be honest, it's a really majestic, whether it is just standing like a statue or swooping down in the sky, flapping its wings. And I think all of those characteristics, it makes it the perfect mirror for the aspirations that our founders had at the birth of the nation. Now, if we're looking at eagles more broadly, if that takes us to Celtic mythology, and eagles there were considered to be the king of birds. And in the lore, it was the god Lu who transformed himself into an eagle, and then he perched on this oak tree, which just so happens to represent the tree of life in Druidry, and that further links the eagle with ideas of sovereignty. Now, the Norse saw eagles as linked between earthly and divine realms. Their vision links them with the past, present, and the future, and therefore for them, they represent prophecy and wisdom. And generally, in Native American folklore, the eagle is seen as being the bravest and the strongest of all birds and occupies a place close to their conception of a creator god. So it seems that regardless of what a people's dominant faiths are or their culture, eagles are perceived as being noble, powerful, and confident. So, with all of that in mind, let's go over a few of our correspondences with the eagle. It's not all of them by any means. But it is a few significant ones. For one, the sun and the planet Jupiter, which both takes us back to that idea of sovereignty, the elements of air and fire, the cardinal directions, the goddess Justitia, who is a Roman goddess of justice, and then the gods Jupiter, Lu, and Zeus. And for witches amongst us, we might visualize the bald eagle when calling the air element in the east when we do cast circles. And so that was just kind of the overview that I have of eagles. And I would love to really solicit your reactions as we go through each particular species. Is this resonating? Is it not? Because, I can come up with my ideas, but I don't know if they're just special to me unless other people are responsive. So your input is most definitely valued. And hello to Lady Anna Spirit Walker. Very glad to have you here. She says, just love this series. Sound is great. I'm very glad to hear that. You never know with a new microphone. So I was hoping this one was going to work out and work out better than my previous microphones because let's be honest, they were not replaced before time, were they? But yeah, I mean, it's so easy to see, just kind of that raw essence of the American spirit. The eagle that is in charge of its surroundings. It's beautiful, it's big, it knows what it's about, it's going to be getting what it needs for itself. That just seems so very, very us. And I hope that it's not just me who's connecting with it on the more spiritual level. But as you're kind of getting your thoughts together, we can go back and forth on all these. Let's go on to the rattlesnake because that was a pretty important one that was associated with the American ethos very early on. And I apologize to those of you who are particularly uncomfortable with snakes. To be honest, I'm not that great with them either. My first encounter with a snake as a child was a rattlesnake, and that was not a good experience. It really set a bad tone on my relationship with reptiles in general. But nevertheless, we're just going to power through this. We're going to be looking at its spiritual and symbolic significance because I think you'll see a little bit more of our culture as reflected in it once we're through. So, to begin with, rattlesnakes are native to both of the American continents, North and South, and they range from southern Canada to central Argentina. So, I mean, these things are freaking everywhere. And the settlers who came here, they would have been more than familiar with this snake. And actually, in 1751, it was Benjamin Franklin who suggested in the Pennsylvania Gazette that as Mother England was forever sending her criminals to the colonies and inflicting the settlers with their presence, that the colonies should return the favor and send their rattlesnakes back to England. He was always cranky with the crown right from the beginning. He thought that was a suitable punishment for what they were inflicting on the colonists. But then you fast forward, 25 years or so, in 1775, and the rebellion against the crown is really getting underway. The rattlesnake began to appear on a particular flag, notably the Gadsden flag, and on drums and other insignia associated with that. And then that takes us to this rather long essay from Benjamin Franklin, and I wanted to quote the entirety of it because I think if I broke it up, it just wouldn't have the same impact. So please bear with me. But under the pseudonym of An American Guesser, Benjamin Franklin wrote an essay published in the Pennsylvania Journal in which he explored how the rattlesnake was an apt mirror for the American character. So let's see what he has to say. I observed on one of the drums belonging to the Marines now raising that was painted a rattlesnake with this modest motto under it, "Don't tread on me." As I know it is the custom to have some device on the arms of every country, I suppose this may have been intended for the arms of America, and as I have nothing to do with public affairs, and as my time is perfectly my own, in order to divert an idle hour, I sat down to guess what could have been intended by this uncommon device. I took care, however, to consult on this occasion a person who is acquainted with heraldry, from whom I learned that it is a rule among the learned in that science that the worthy profitable properties of the animal in the crest born shall be considered, and that the base ones cannot have been intended. He likewise informed me that the ancients considered the serpent as an emblem of wisdom, and in certain attitudes of endless duration, both which circumstances I suppose may have had in that view. Having gained this intelligence, and recollecting that countries are sometimes represented by animals peculiar to them, it occurred to me that the rattlesnake is found in no other quarter of the world besides America, and it may therefore have been chosen on that account to represent her. But then the worthy properties of a snake, I judged, would be hard to point out. This rather raised than suppressed my curiosity, and having frequently seen the rattlesnake, I ran over in my mind every property by which she was distinguished, not only from other animals, but from those of the same genus or class of animals, endeavoring to fix some meaning to each, not wholly inconsistent with common sense. I recollected that her eye excelled in brightness that of any other animal's, and that she has no eyelids. She may therefore be esteemed as an emblem of vigilance. She never begins an attack, nor, when once engaged, ever surrenders. She is therefore an emblem of magnanimity and true courage. As if anxious to prevent all pretensions of quarreling with her, the weapons with which nature had furnished her she conceals in the roof of her mouth, so that to those who are unacquainted with her she appears to be the most defenseless animal, and even when those weapons are shown and extended for her defense, they appear weak and contemptible, but their wounds, however small, are decisive and fatal. Conscious of this, she never wounds till she has generously given notice, even to her enemy, and cautioned him against the danger of treading on her. Was I wrong, sir, in thinking that this a strong picture of the temper and conduct of America? The poison of her teeth is the necessary means of digesting her food, and at the same time is certain destruction to her enemies. This may be understood to intimate that those things which are destructive to our enemies may be to us not only harmless, but absolutely necessary to our existence. I confess I was wholly at a loss what to make of the rattles, till I went back and counted them and found them just 13, exactly the number of the colonies united in America, and I recollected too that this was the only part of the snake which increased in numbers. Perhaps it might only be a fancy, but I conceded the painted had shown half a formed additional rattle, which I suppose may have been intended to represent the province of Canada. We've always been after Canada, haven't we? Anyway, continuing on, 'tis curious and amazing to observe how distinct and independent of each other the rattles are of this animal, and yet how firmly they are united together, so as never to be separated but by breaking them to pieces. One of those rattles singly is incapable of producing sound, but the ringing of 13 together will preserve their lives, while singly they would probably perish. The power of fascination attributed to her by a generous construction may be understood to mean that those who consider the liberty and blessings which America affords, and once come over her, never afterwards leave her, but spend their lives with her. She strongly resembles America in this, for she is beautiful in youth, and her beauty increaseth with her age. Her tongue is also blue and forked as the lightning, and her abode is among impenetrable rocks. So that's quite a favorable description and provided by someone who wasn't exactly fond of rattlesnakes any more than probably what you and I are. So, regardless of how we feel about the rattlesnake or just snakes in general, it is difficult not to see our cultural character expressed through the lens that Benjamin Franklin examined the rattlesnake all those years ago during the Revolution. This idea of, not really wanting to fight, I mean, most of us don't. I mean, our government, that's a different story, but we're talking about American culture, not American governance. But we're not looking for excuses to get into fights. We're not looking for reasons to be constantly at odds. We are not looking for reasons to get into a scrabble. But once we're there, we do have this tendency to be pretty committed and fight to the absolute death. And I think social media does bear that out. All of our battles are currently being fought on those platforms, which is better than them being fought on the streets, as nasty as the platforms can get. So when you look at it through this, it's not just the historical aspect of this snake being represented on the Gadsden flag to throw the bird to the British, but it really is a mirror of us, of how we try to proceed through life. So what else can we learn? To begin with, the one thing about the rattlesnake is that the bite of it is serious, especially if we don't get treatment. But the venom of the rattlesnake is used to create antivenom, and that really goes back to the point that Benjamin Franklin was talking about how the things that are dangerous to a rattlesnake's enemies, like its venom, maybe to us, the key to our necessary survival. So I felt like that was an interesting, uh, now almost an as above so below kind of a principle in action there. And I think that this fact that we can use our venom to make anti-venom, I think that's really a lesson to us about the nature of healing, that the answer to what ails us frequently lies in what wounded us to begin with, and we're not going to be able to settle that wound until we get into what caused it to begin with. And the fact that rattlesnakes can and often do provide a warning before striking, that corresponds quite well with, again, many Americans who prefer not to be embroiled in controversies if they can avoid it. They want to go on their merry way. That's why you see so many people say, why can't we just leave each other alone? It is that rattlesnake tendency coming out of them. They just want to be left to go on their merry way. And they really resent it when they get dragged into things against their will. But that's more so on the mundane level. Now, spiritually, rattlesnakes commonly represent strength and alertness, intuition, guardianship, and wisdom. And for that reason, those of us who practice the craft faith, we might choose to use the rattlesnake to represent the fire element in the south. So that is what I have for you on the subject of the rattlesnake. And I see we have thoughts. Looking forward to this. Lady Anna says, I'm Miami Indian. Animals have equal standing and importance as man in my culture. No animal is evil, all playing an equally important role in nature, even rattlers. I'm glad you bring that up, and I'm very grateful to you for sharing that because, obviously I am not of native descent. So having you to kind of balance out this discussion is extraordinarily helpful, especially since, we're both living on this land and these animals, so, we're figuring out ways to resonate with them. And she also says, live in West Texas on the edge of the desert, grateful for the rattle warning. Oh yeah, I bet. I bet. I mean, I'm up here in Missouri, and we have our share of rattlesnakes, but I know it's nothing in comparison with Texas. So thank goodness for those rattles. I mean, we would be in pretty bad shape. They would be far more dangerous to us if they did not have the courtesy to give us a rattle. And I think that says something about also the national character. I think a lot of us, some of our more ferocious disagreements that occur in the political sphere over, whatever issue is bothering us that day. It's that's the rattle. You're bugging me, my fellow countrymen. You're bugging me about this or that. Rattle, 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 and it's just it's funny about how there's still this impulse to try to avoid the confrontation if it can be avoided. And again, once committed, it's committed. So, and again, anyone watching, if you have thoughts as we go along, because I know it takes a little bit of time to type, just share them, and I'm happy to go back and forth between animals on this one. Next up, we are going to be talking about the buffalo. Now, the American bison is the icon of the Old West, the chapter of our history defined by manifest destiny, and a post Civil War America that was deeply in conflict with itself and deeply in conflict with the tribes. And, everyone was struggling to forge their fate. And the nation in general, I mean, that was actually a very fragile moment for us. I would argue just as fragile as the Civil War itself, because there were so many things going on that really could have led to the whole project collapsing. I mean, it was not outside the range of possibility. So the buffalo once ranged from what is now central Canada and the interior of the United States. In consequence, with the conflict between America and the tribes, the buffaloes were nearly hunted to extinction, and that was specifically in an effort to destroy the tribes. Uh, War tactics are nasty. I mean, and there's just no other way to put it. We can acknowledge what it is. But thankfully, we have a lot of modern conservation efforts that are well underway to preserve the species. In Missouri, one of those conservation efforts is to take. They have a small herd that I think they're still raising up. It's close to a little attraction that we call Missouri Town, where they have a lot of older buildings from the 1800s, and they fortunate in its own little village. It's meant to be educational, especially for cool school kids. But they have some animals there, and in the field, kind of opposite where you go into the entrance of Missouri Town, they had a lot of buffalo, and they even had. They had apparently had the buffalo to be very well accustomed to people because they had, you could, feed the buffalo little grains and carrots and whatnot, and it was fine. And the last time I was there, it actually came up to the fence and it let me feed it and it let me kind of, you know, give it, head scratchies. And it was such an incredible thing. I had no confidence in the fence to be able to contain the buffalo if it got mad and was really determined to get me. But I would not have traded the opportunity to give it a few lovings and just to be able to appreciate just how huge and majestic that animal was up close. It was absolutely incredible. Loved it. Loved the experience. And hopefully conservation efforts will continue on because it is not America without the buffalo, and that's just the truth of it. So the buffalo was a literal source of life and abundance, as well as embodiment to the link between to the land for the plains tribes, and of course, all the various tribes. They would have their own separate lore, and they would have their own particular opinions and nuanced interpretation of the buffalo. Um, it's too much material to go into to because this presentation is really just more so introducing the subject of looking at these animals in a more spiritual light. So we can't get into all of that. But according to Animal Speak by Ted Andrews, the Lakota had a legend that there was one day a beautiful woman who was dressed in white buffalo fur just appeared to the people. And then she brought to the Lakota the sacred pipe, which showed how all things were connected. She taught the men and women many mysteries of the earth, and she taught them how to pray and to follow the proper path upon the earth. She showed them how to pray for and bring forth abundance. And as she left, she rolled up upon the earth and became a white buffalo calf, and then she disappeared over the horizon. And no sooner had she disappeared than great herds of buffaloes were seen all around the camps, which I really love that origin story. That's really a beautiful, beautiful story. So, one of the things we can take away from that story is that the buffalo is the union of material and spiritual blessings all in one. And I think that the spiritual lesson of the buffalo is that proper action is necessary to produce good outcome. Because, of course, this woman who came to the Lakota people, she was teaching them how do you survive on the earth? What kind of person do you need to be? That's all about how is a person supposed to be living life on earth in order to have a successful life? And I think that the warning that's inherent in that is that the attempt to circumvent that order of not having the proper action leading to proper results, that is what is going to result in disaster for people. And by extension, this highlights the need for us to embrace responsibility as a community, as individuals, because if the natural balance has gotten out of whack, it's important to identify what needs to happen in order to fix the problem and act on it, as opposed to obsessing over who is or isn't to blame and failing to do anything useful about the situation. The point of acknowledging a problem is to solve it, not to wallow in it. And I think the other lesson that I certainly am taking from it is that life requires that we have standards for ourselves, that how we behave and treat others, how we treat the land we depend upon for survival, how we seek the divine, what we do with our knowledge and our skills. A lack of propriety can ruin a life. And that's very much the message that the Lakota story teaches, at least in my opinion. So the turbulence of our own times, I think that may make the era of the Old West relatable to us, and we can learn from the mistakes and successes of, all parties involved in those past events. I mean, and it was a complicated time. It really was. And the buffalo can be a symbol of us to take the totality of that history into account, and I think it can also represent our potential to learn the lessons, or what happens if we fail to learn the lessons from that history, and the consequences of both paths. Do we learn or do we not? And I was looking at the dream symbolism of buffalo, and generally, from what I was able to find, that it's considered a good omen, especially if it happens to be a white buffalo in the dream. However, if you're dreaming of a stampede of buffalo, that can be a sign of extreme stress or that someone in your life is seeking to intimidate you. So that's something to keep in mind if ever it should appear into your dreamscapes. And then during ritual, one might choose to call the buffalo as a representative of the earth element in the north. So that is what I have on the buffalo. Anyone have any thoughts they'd like to jump in with on this one? I mean, there's so much to say about all of these animals, and again, the presentation, it's brief on purpose because any one of these things could be, multi-hour presentations, and we're trying to get through a lot of different animals and different animal kingdoms. So, if you happen to have thoughts, again, don't be bashful. Be happy to hear them. Now we are come to the bullfrog. So, American bullfrogs are found all over the continental United States. They live in marshes, ponds, at the edges of lakes, and around slow moving rivers and creeks. Their croaking song is commonly heard through the spring and summer, especially after rain, and that serves as a means to attract mates and to warn predators. This makes them creatures of both water and earth, that links them to both of those elements, as well as to mythical beings such as the Fae and the elves. So they're almost in kind of, well, they're not almost a kind of an in between animal. They literally are an in between animal. They are in between the water and the earth. And anything that's in between spaces, we know from witchcraft lore that tends to be an area that's more potent with magic. So that's one of the reasons why frogs and toads are commonly associated with the witches. So the spiritual lessons of bullfrogs that they have to teach us is one of metamorphosis, and that this is demonstrated by their life cycle. First, they begin as eggs floating on the water, then they become tadpoles, and they remain in that state for a year or two before they finally transform into full-fledged adult frogs. And this is a mirror for the spiritual journey of many people, as well as the history of America to date. It's been a transformation from very vulnerable beginnings and struggling to find our way until we come out the other side with a sense of more so of who we are and what we're doing and what we're striving for. And periodically we cycle back to who on earth are we, what are we doing, and why are we doing it? And I think that's it's fair to say we're in the midst of that right now. But once we get past it, we'll have a stronger sense of where we are. We'll be a lot more grounded. At least I hope. Fingers crossed. Now, frogs in general are so strongly associated with profound change that it was the ancient Egyptians who went so far as to use frogs as a symbol for reincarnation, which arguably that would be the greatest change that humans ever experience. So there's a lot to go over with the bullfrogs, and they are part of our landscape, and they're worth taking a look at. And they can mean a lot of different things to us: fertility, good fortune, prosperity. But perhaps the greatest symbolic meaning for Americans lies in the bullfrog representing change and embracing adaptability. Because in our culture, we are constantly being challenged. As much as we are all throwing around accusations to one another about being in our own echo chambers, the reality is that we are being constantly challenged about everything we think in one form or another. And that really does require us to break out of old molds and consider different perspectives, including perspectives that are quite antagonistic to our own. I mean, just this morning, I found myself in the midst of the most astonishing debate. It wasn't the sort of thing I expected to get into when I had my tea this morning, but there it was. And it was about as antagonistic as it gets. And, uh, and of course, as we embrace these challenges and we meet them and we deal with them, that is allowing ourselves to be shaped by this evolutionary process. Now, the humble bullfrog, it is definitely not the most prominent of animals in pagan spirituality, but I think maybe that ought to change, at least for American pagans. For one thing, it is the proximity to it, and for another, it is the symbolic transformation, which I think has a lot of relevance for us. As we progress in our personal journeys, from the egg, the beginnings, to the tadpole, where we're trying to get a feel for the world, to the frog stage, where we're ready to meet it, we can find understanding in the spirit form of the bullfrog. So, if anyone decides to reach out to meditation to this particular animal in spirit form, or if they already have, and they have anything that they think would be of interest to share, I mean, definitely let that know. And if you're catching this on the replay, absolutely type out your experience in the comment section. We're all here to learn from one another. But let me see. All righty, it looks like we're still good on the comments. We will move on to the monarch butterfly. So monarch butterflies, they can be found all over the world, and they are very much a familiar sight in North America. They are one of the few insects that migrate. They prefer to head towards Mexico and Southern California around November, once the cold really starts to set in, and they return to us again once more around March or so. These butterflies live in meadows, prairies, grasslands, along roadsides. They require milkweed, among other flowers, to survive, but milkweed is extremely important. And in fact, they only breed where milkweed can be found. And I know currently there's an effort to encourage people to be planting milkweeds in order to support and properly sustain the monarch butterfly population. Now, the spiritual significance of monarch butterflies is tied to the process of spiritual awakening and rebirth and transformation. Just as the caterpillar must go into the cocoon and then emerge with wings, so too we must sometimes retreat far into ourselves, completely shielded from prying eyes, in order for us to gain spiritual insight and then be able to emerge and to figuratively fly. American pagans are just entering that cocoon on the spiritual level. Because a caterpillar stage of our development is really insufficient for the challenges of the future. We can't just be transplants. We began as just extensions of our pagan cousins overseas, and um, we were even told that those of us who trace our ancestry to multiple different peoples, we have to just choose one path and not embrace all of our ancestral gods, and that we can't identify with the land that we live on, even if our roots on this continent go back many hundreds of years. And I've always found that a bit harsh. And I don't know who died and made anyone who has adopted that opinion gods, uh, but nevertheless, that attitude has persisted, and it goes right along with some of the other attitudes that many of us were taught, that paganism is solely defined by the past. Anything that deviates from it is inauthentic, even if it's obvious that some practices are just an evolution of what came before. And in that mindset, there's just no future. And we can't continue to take direction from our non American cousins at the expense of never developing a voice of our own, and at the expense of never truly bonding with the land we live on. So we cannot remain these spiritual caterpillars. So the spiritual cocoon is beckoning, and I think this series is really part of us retreating back to that cocoon. And when we emerge, then we will have our lovely figurative wings, and we will become unapologetic American pagans who are not afraid to stand on their own 2 feet and have their own way of doing things, and indeed fly away from the critics who don't think that we have the right to do those things. So that is what I have for you on the monarch butterfly. And as chat is still quiet, this takes us to the American house spider. So, the American house spider, also called common house spider, is perhaps the most regularly seen species of arachnid on this continent, which is why I chose it. And they live everywhere from southern Canada and throughout the lower 48 states. Now, these spiders are not picky about where they live. We can find them in the garden or the garage, a shed, basements, attics, barns. They seem to follow the ethos that home is where you hang your hat, or where you weave your web. In their case, so this is a familiar sight to us all. We know what these spiders are all about. And interestingly, if the American house spider is left alone to just mind its own business, it may live as long as 7 years in the same web. I mean, can you imagine 7 years? That's a long time for a spider. And I find this sense of rootedness It has it in common with Americans who don't necessarily like to be constantly moving around. I mean, some people, their wandering foot gets to itching, and every couple of years, they want to move. But not everyone feels that way. And a lot of people in America are very happy to put down roots as long as their circumstances don't require them to change their address. These spiders eat a variety of insects, and thankfully, they only rarely bite humans. And the bite from them is more like a pinch. It's uncomfortable, but generally not otherwise harmful. And any kind of serious reaction to them is pretty rare. So, yay for that. Now, in a spiritual context, spiders they represent creativity and weaving the web of faith and the connectivity between all things and balance and adaptability. And dreaming of spiders indicates the need for us to take action in some way. So we need to look a little bit at the lore surrounding spiders. For the Navajo, the spider grandmother is a well-known figure for not just the Navajo, but the Kirasan and the Hopi peoples. And in the story, she's part of the beginning of the creation. She taught people survival skills, including the art of weaving. There's no separating spiders from any ideas of weaving, and you cannot separate the idea of weaving from fate. And we see also in Greek mythology there's a mortal woman named Ariadne. I should have wrote Ariadne. I don't know why I put Ariadne, but it's Aranakri. And she had a weaving competition with the goddess Athena. And there are different versions of why they were doing it and who won and what that all meant. But consistently afterwards of that competition, she was transformed into a spider, and so she remains. And the Norse believed that the Norns themselves were weavers of fate, much like spiders weave their web, and they actually cut the thread of a life when it comes to its end. So even though it's all framed in these different contexts, there's a consistent rather, underlying thought that the spiritual lesson of spiders involves deciding what threads to bring together and how that ties into life in this world and even in one circumstances in the next. So I think this is a very powerful thought for us as of Americans, because self-determination, being active web weavers, is so core and central to our character. We cannot conceive, and we really detest and actively resist when someone is trying to dictate how we weave our threads as opposed to leaving us to do that for ourselves. We just don't like it. We have that in common with spiders. We want to be the ones who have that under control. We want to be choosers. We want to be deciders. So I think there's a lot we can relate to and take from spiders as a spirit animal. All righty. And that takes us to the salmon. Now, the salmon are native to both the North American West and to the British Isles. They can live in both saltwater and freshwater. And one of the species' most remarkable traits is its journey upstream when the time comes to spawn, and that ensures the next generation comes into being. Making extraordinary sacrifices and overcoming profound difficulties is a common feature of the stories that led many American families to coming to this continent and starting over, particularly at the beginning of when we enter the more American chapter of history. It was not an easy thing for them to do, and they gave up a lot. And it was all because they could not see a future for themselves where they were, and they had to think of their children. And amazingly, crossing the ocean in a rickety rough wooden boat and coming where they may not be welcome and have to start all over again. Apparently, that was a more appealing option. Kind of tells you what things were like in their home countries, doesn't it? Now, in Celtic lore, the salmon was considered to be the oldest animal, and there was a salmon called Bradan the salmon who swam in the well of wisdom for all of his life. And this well or pool is surrounded by 9 hazel trees, and the salmon eats the hazelnuts when they fall, and it is the hazelnuts that give him wisdom. And for someone to drink from that well, at least figuratively, that enables a person to grow wise themselves. Now, American pagans might choose to ritually eat salmon or even fish for salmon if they live in the right area when they are feeling the need to seek wisdom to bolster their personal resilience or help them face necessary and unavoidable change. And of course, if one seeks out an animal spirit guide and encounters the salmon, that can be taken as a sign that difficulties lies ahead. But you'll be having a companion who knows a little something about what those difficulties are like. Now, the spirit of the salmon can be an excellent teacher for us to learn how to seize our challenges with some gusto. Instead of dreading the work to come or seeking for ways to get out of it, we can learn to embrace the role of problem solver as an honorable thing. It's something that enables growth for us as a person on the spiritual level. And of course, we need to remember that the salmon is not afraid to invest all of its efforts and in order to bring hope in the future into being. And spiritually, this illustrates the character of someone who isn't so afraid of losing something that they become afraid to try and have it. We can learn resolve and how to make decisions and not look back from the example of the salmon in order to properly move forward, even if perhaps sacrifice is involved. And of course, practitioners of the craft may see fit to call upon the salmon as a symbol of the water element in the West when they do ritual. So that's what I have for you on the salmon. Now, before I move on to the mythological beings, I want to check in with chat. And Lady Anna Spirit Walker says, love to learn about animals' correspondence with the elements and directions in ritual. My culture assigns human attributes to animal spirits, but I've never included this info in my common practices. Yeah, it's interesting. Let's see. Oh, and she goes on to say, I come from the Turtle Clan. We are the tribe's storytellers, carrying our stories on our backs. I love that. I love the symbolism of that. And I love the fact that there's a proper role for that. That's something that I think has been very much missing in American culture about people who do see it as their role to continue to tell the stories. So I think that's absolutely beautiful. And and I realize that it is kind of a new thought to incorporate some of the symbolisms because I mean, this is a bit of mixing of practices here, but I mean, this is America. I mean, you have a mixture of peoples. I mean, in my family, from my mom's side, she came here in the 1880s. They did, and my father's side of the family's been here since 1621. So that's a few hundred years of history, not to be compared with many thousands, of course, but it's a long time. It's a long time to have people who were just kind of occupying where they lived as opposed to truly bonding with it. And my hope is that by looking at these animals in the spiritual lens and thinking about how to incorporate them into one's practice and in whatever fashion, I hope that'll help create and really solidify that bond because I don't see any kind of good future that comes from people not feeling a sense of belonging and kinship with the land that they live on. That doesn't just doesn't seem healthy in general, and it doesn't seem consistent with what human beings do. So, oh no, maybe this will help plant some seeds. So let's go on to the Phoenix. So I think it's pretty obvious why I would have chosen the Phoenix, but nevertheless, let's get into the details a little bit. The story of the Phoenix has roots in ancient Egypt. It's best known to most people via Greek mythology, but it does appear in a variety of mythologies. And that's something you're welcome to look into, after the broadcast if you care to. This bird is said to have the head of a pheasant, the back of a tortoise, the tail of a fish, and is very brightly colored. It lives for up to 500 years and then flies to Heliopolis, where it's consumed in fire. And then 3 days later, a young phoenix rises up from the ashes and goes on to live for a further 500 years. And those who dream of the phoenix are believed to have new resources for strength and prosperity. So that is kind of the bare bone basics of what the phoenix is all about. Now, for us, I would argue that the founding of the United States was much like the rebirth of the phoenix. It consumed in fire and enduring that fire until a new nation was born. And our culture went through another such cycle during the Civil War. And today we are once again forced to confront the fires and sort out who we are, why we are, and how we intend to proceed in the future. And it isn't easy to maintain this kind of philosophical perspective when we are in the midst of the transformation process itself. And I would imagine it would not be easy for the phoenix when it is facing the trials of renewal, being consumed in the fire, waiting around, and then being rehatching again as a young phoenix. But in order for the new to arise, the old has to die. And there's no way to avoid the inherent suffering in that. And our task is to acknowledge the nature of who we are as a people and to learn to face our fires bravely. We are the phoenix. We just need to embrace that role. So that was why I brought the Phoenix into everything. So, any thoughts on that before I move on to the Thunderbird? Okay, we're good for now. Now, I want to say that I understand and realize that this may be a bit controversial in some quarters. My justification is because if you live on this land, you are coming into contact with the spirits associated with that land. So either your choice is to come to grips with that or to ignore it, as has been done, and which I am not at all convinced that some of the problems we are not facing in American society right now go right back to the spiritual issues of people not coming into relationship with the spirits that were present in the land, because that was not the custom of the Christian settlers. And I think that that has played quite a large role in forming a lot of different problems. So that's my justification. That's my explanation. That's what I've got. Now, on to the Thunderbird itself. The Thunderbird is a mythological creature known to many Native American cultures, and while each tribe has their own nuanced take on its symbolism, it's broadly regarded, generally speaking, as representing strength, wisdom, courage, protection, and good fortune. And again, generally, it's portrayed as the most enormous of birds with an extraordinary wingspan, with feathers that are red and yellow and orange and deep blue, purple and green. I mean, just the whole freaking rainbow in one glorious bird. It has a very long, big, curved beak, horns, and casts a gigantic shadow over the earth. So quite, quite the specimen. Quite the specimen. And the Thunderbird has tremendous powers over the weather. It's considered to be the bringer of storms and rain. Its eyes flash with lightning, and the flap of its wings is like thunder. And whether we have ancestry that leads back to the native tribes or not, this mythological creature is of this land, and its stories and energy is still impacting us all. And ignoring it will not shield us from its effects, and also ignoring it won't create goodwill between ourselves and the spirit of the land. I mean, we cannot change the past or anything that happened or any failures to show honor to the land spirits, but we can choose to honor them now, and I'm more focused on how we fix the future rather than worrying about litigating the past. So, thanking the Thunderbird when we are bestowed with rain and when the worst of destructive storms pass us by without injury. I think those are simple ways to acknowledge this spirit and honor it without going overboard or stepping on any toes. And I think that living here and thriving means forming spiritual ties with the spirits that are known and have been on this land for quite a while. That's just my take on it. So, now that we have the whole spectrum of the various animals that I think are worthy of being given special consideration in American paganism, I want to kind of conclude with a few thoughts and questions that, anyone watching, I hope you feel very welcome and free to just kind of jump in, share your thoughts. And again, if you're watching this on the replay, let me know. What you're thinking in the comments below, because I really think it's important for us to start a dialogue about all of this. So, the first question I would really ask is, do these animals and mythological creatures resonate with you on the cultural and or the spiritual level? Now, I've already made my case for why I think they do. They are applicable in general, and of course they do appeal to me personally, and they do feature in my practice. But I'm really curious about anyone in our little community about how they feel about that, where they're at with all of that. Just I would just really like to know. See also, and this is a closely related question, do you think these examples accurately reflect American culture? I really do see traces of our shared cultural soul in these animals. I mean, even though, as I mentioned, the when the European settlers came here, they did not give proper deference to the spirits of the land. They did not bond with it. They did not form relationships, and that created a lot of problems. But still, they were interacting with those energies, albeit unconsciously. And I feel like a lot of that did seep into us over time. I think a lot of that fed into the rebellion against England once it came down to it. But again, let me know what you think. Can you see yourself interacting with the spirits of these animals in ritual? I gave a few broad ideas, but they're definitely not the only possibilities out there. And I think we could be very creative, and I think we have opportunities to explore this. Do you think that working with these animals will deepen your relationship with the land? I mean, I really hope so. I mean, that's the whole point why I'm doing this. It's why this entire series even exists, because I think we do need to acknowledge where we are. think, and I think that I think we do need to properly bond with the land itself, and so any mechanism of doing so and making that happen, I think, is ultimately going to lead to improved spiritual health. And then, what animals local to you hold special spiritual significance in your practice? Because again, the continental United States is a big place. And then we have Alaska way over in the north. And then we have Hawaii over into the Pacific. And there are different animals that are prominent in those areas, and they bring a different energy and a different feeling to the atmosphere and the land there. People have different relations. They affect people's way of life in a different way, and so I think opening up our minds about what's really right next to us, as well as what's large in the American consciousness. I think that's another way we can further spiritually develop. And then finally, what will you choose to do with this information? Pretty big question because the possibilities are abundant. We do not have any lack of options. And just think, I mean, the longer we all live here, the more history is accumulated and the more opportunities to have that back and forth relationship with these spirits really does exist. And as I've said many times, I mean, we are laying the foundation for what the future generations of American pagans really have to look back upon. I think it's important that we figure out, a little bit of the mechanics and what do we do with these things and what does it all mean to us, just so that the kids who come after us, 2, 3, 4, 5 generations after us, that they're not having to start over from scratch, or they're not having to approach these questions and these possibilities with a blank slate. I don't think that's a nice thing to do to one's descendants. I do not have the boomer attitude of, I figured it out. The kids will have to figure it out without me. That's just not nice. What do we live for if not to also lay the groundwork for what comes after us? Those who came before us, they laid the foundation for us. We should lay the foundation for who comes after that. It's the ultimate in the paying it forward kind of mentality, because life does not begin or end with ourselves, and we are not atomized, disconnected things, even though the worst aspects of modern culture makes us feel that way sometimes. And sometimes I think there are certain trends that definitely push people into that direction, but it's done very artificially, and you can see the detrimental impact it has on people's psyches, and how it's spiritually detrimental to them, about how it's affecting their emotional balance, how it's hurting them physically even. It's just not a good situation. So thinking more so in the whole, I am part of something that is larger than myself. I have my part to play. It's not going to be the same exact part as everyone else because we are individuals, but I need to play my role. I need to weave my thread into this greater whole. So that's my hope for now and for the future. I really look forward to hearing what feedback you guys have on this one. I know this is new ground and new treading new water for a lot of us, and certainly just the mindset of thinking about American paganism as having the right to exist and evolve independently of our cousins from overseas. I realize that's a bit heretical in some circles, so I know this is a big step. I think if you're willing to at least entertain it and hear what I have to say, I think that makes you pretty brave. I definitely appreciate it. And yeah, I just hope I hear from you guys soon. But that's what I have for you right now. Next month, for the real episode 4, again, my apologies for the title. I need to correct it. But next month, I want to talk about the American Tree of Life and explore the world of native flora, because that's another aspect of claiming our heritage as American pagans, about thinking about uh, what plant species are really prominent amongst us, what they're good for. And of course, that's a little bit more complicated because a lot of plant species have been imported. But I mean, it's interesting. We'll see what we can do. We'll see what symbols are resonating with us, and hopefully, I'll be able to bring something of interest to you there. Before I go, Lady Anna Spirit Walker says, as a melting pot landmass, I love your thoughts about weaving your thread for those that come after. Such a wonderful episode. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very, very much. I I'm very much appreciative of that kind of encouragement. She also says, "Thanks for the series. Thank you for being here and listening to me. I know I do tend to ramble on a little bit. That's why I have notes to try to limit the rambling. So, thank you for putting up with my presentation style. And I'm glad it is of interest to you, and hopefully it will be to others as well. But that is it for now, guys. I will definitely see you guys later on. And again, if you have any further thoughts, leave them for me in the comments section, or you can always email me at brigantiablackbird@protonmail.com. Just let me know your thoughts. And of course, if you have interest in ever having a conversation about your own explorations of American paganism, or there are issues that we're facing that you just want to talk about, maybe join me on the live stream, definitely reach out to me and email me about that. And we can talk about it, see how we might frame that. And if we can figure out a time to do that, you just got to let me know because, again, this isn't a one woman project. I'm just uh, I'm just putting the topic on the table, and I'm hoping someone else decides to take it up with me. So again, reach out for anything, and yeah, definitely it. Too much rambling. I'll see you guys later. Bye.